The artificial intelligence part in Africa is to me a tricky one, and it's tricky because it in order for it to be successful, it relies on the assumption that certain key infrastructures are already there:
Hmm.
power, water, steadily reliable connectivity. It's already there. Once you
Hmm.
have that and many interconnected networks, you can build artificial intelligence networks or data center or services to power a whole new side of the industry. Um, we are not technically there yet, right? And that's
Hmm.
because of the infrastructure part of the business. Now, what I do see is that there's now also rampant investment.
Welcome to another episode of Value Seller Talks, where we meet the visionaries who are transforming industries through innovation, integrity, and impact. I'm your host, Deepak Bajaj, and today with us, the guest is Fabio Jos, a seasoned sales leader with close to 2 decades of experience in the telecommunication industry across Angola and different African markets. Fabio has been instrumental in shaping the continent's connectivity landscape from the inception and expansion of connectivity to driving strategic commercial growth across Africa and the different markets. His leadership has played a key role in development of POP, which is point of point, data centers and IP business units, establishing Angola's presence in the global digital ecosystem. A true expert in telecommunication, submarine cables, data centers, internet, and cloud services, Fabio combines deep technical understanding with sharp commercial acumen. As a senior business developer and strategic product leader, he has successfully built new ventures, strengthened partnership, and introduced innovative products that continue to redefine digital infrastructure in Africa. He also contribute a lot of activities, lot of initiatives to uplift the local communities within Angola and also being known as a mentor for many people within the country. His journey reflects the power of resilience, foresight, and commitment to growth, qualities that make him an inspiration for emerging leaders in the telecom sector. Welcome, Fabio, to the Value Seller Talks.
Thank you, Deepak, and it's a real honor to be here. Appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a long time coming. Having the chance to engage a little bit, to tell a little bit about the journey and the story of what connectivity and telecommunications and all these services that impact the lives of the Angolans and the different people, especially in an important year as this year, where Angola, the country that I come from, is celebrating its 50 years of independence. So it's quite symbolic for me to be here and speak about these matters, whilst we look a little bit towards the past, but analyze the present and understand where we're going towards the future.
Very. So the timing is perfectly correct because 50 years of independence and it's a right time because that's a right references which we will get and obviously the future of the connectivity and the other initiative which is happening in the Angola. But before we start, we would love to know about Fabio Jose as a person.
Yeah, so I am Fabio Jose, born in Angola. I lived here for most of my time. I managed to take some time away and study in a near neighbor country, in Namibia, where I did, went to high school and university there. I attended University of Namibia, And yeah, I am an individual, but not anymore. I'm married. I've got three lovely children, one lovely wife. Um, I'm also a son to my parents, a brother to my older brother and sister, a member in my community, and it's just a simple guy, so a guy that is trying to make the best with what I have available to me, and always trying to be to uphold specific values in terms of integrity, uh, persistence, and always respect. So, in a nutshell, that's me.
Wow. You explained it in very simple and easy terms. Yes, I love the simplicity which you have. Uh, if I talk about 2 decades back, how you transition, how you entered into the telecommunication domain.
I had no idea. I've no, I literally have no idea. I didn't go to school for telecommunications or for IT. I did information studies and industrial psychology. So a lot of my academic skills came from interaction with people, came with the social aspect. I thought that communication skills were going to be important. Interpersonal communication skills were going to be important. Were going to play a role in my life, but I didn't know it was going to take me where I am right now. Looking back, I think it did prepare me for the ability to interact with people in different cultures, in different environments, in different settings. And I think that's the one thing that I truly believe that makes a difference in terms of what I do. Like I said, I did not come from a technical background. I learned everything
Mm,
um, from the technical point of view whilst I started working, and that was a good thing, I think, because I was fortunate to have really good engineers and really good mentors, really good leaders, and and was directly involved early stages in very important projects, right? And
mm,
so that drove me to learn and research and did a lot of self-learning. But to be honest, don't I don't consider myself a person that is a self-made person. I consider myself a product of having good people around me and just being aware enough that I had to understand that the people around me could contribute, could teach me, could share the knowledge, and I did the best I could. And so that's where I started. Now, it was a very different time when I started back in 2012.
mm,
Um, Angola had just joined the initiative to build the second international submarine cable system. And I went for interesting enough, I went for a job interview with my former boss, and the idea was to do sales, right?
mm,
Okay, and so
mm,
and one of the key requisites was that she was looking for was the ability to interact with people, uh, and so I was quite confident in my abilities of interacting with people, and they gave me an opportunity. And from that point on, it's just been an interesting experience whereby I'm very grateful and very thankful towards the contributions that everyone around me has played, from all of the support from the engineers that have taught me on the ground, all of the concepts, all of the aspects of the technology, from the leaders that given me opportunity to participate in these conversations from the business point of view, so that I can understand how the technology matches up with the business and what the impact that is. Um, and so, yeah, I truly consider myself a product of the people that are around me, that were around me, And I will forever be a student, somebody that is open to learning and understanding, taking my experiences and the things that I've seen, the challenges that I've been through, um, and applying it to the best of my abilities.
Wow. Interesting. So your learning capability and the learning attitude is something, which has proved that if you come from any of the background, but you can adjust and you can grow, as you rightly mentioned, be a product of what has surrounded you and continue with your learning. It's a very important message because people generally get stuck that if they had done engineering, they should go only for the engineering stuff. Obviously, at some time they will change their direction
Hmm.
once they become a mature enough, but that's a give a very true understanding. You mentioned about submarine cable, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
the only thing which I understand from a submarine that the cable which goes at the ocean bed, right, under the sea.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, to be honest, at the time, I'd never heard of that. I'd never heard
Mm,
of a submarine cable system, and so I managed to get involved in the activation, in the commercialization, in the selling of capacity on the WACS, which is the West African submarine cable system. Um, it's a system that goes from South Africa, if you want to call it, or from the UK,
mm,
across Africa, connecting a couple of countries. And Angola, through the previous company that I worked for had acquired capacity or was entered into that project, and it was quite an innovation. First of all, I remember telling my parents that where I'm going to work and what I'm going to do, and nobody understood anything about it.
mm,
And clearly, today I understand why. It's a different conversation now because the company also had a massive growth and has now a lot of visibility. Um, And so we were fortunate. There were a few people that were knowledgeable about that. I remember we had some consultants, some guys teaching us what it is, that it does, and how it works. And then came the real aspect of the practical part of it, which was to really see physically where these systems were being deployed. My first interaction with what we call the PFA, power feeding equipment, which is the equipment that generates power or that powers that portion of the submarine system. And to understand that it has to generate enough power and has technology that amplifies the signal one way and the other way, so that the other cable landing stations that also have power feeding equipment can connect to it. So, I was truly fortunate to not to say to learn these concepts in university per se, but in the real actual sense. People are teaching the concepts, but you're also looking at the equipment. You actually see what's happening, how it all operates, and so that was an interesting perspective. That's why I found out that 90% of the internet around the world is powered by submarine cable systems. I had no idea about that.
mm,
Until this day, and it still happens. And even though it's a very, small, almost microscopic submarine cables, or
mm,
optic cables that are able to transmit light, essentially.
yeah,
That's where the massive volumes of information go from one point to another, and that there are systems that are interconnected in many different places across the world that are responsible for that, and that there are people behind these systems maintaining, operating, making sure that these systems are powered, maintained, that the fiber path, the path in which these submarine cable systems go from, are clear and they have no obstructions. That there are technologies or companies behind that provide different types of technologies, and that they even entire industries dedicated to maintenance of these submarine
mm,
cable systems. Just so it's a completely different world to what I was accustomed to, and even the understanding of how telecommunications actually works, how
mm.
these networks are all interconnected, and how each part of the network has a key role to perform. So that was an interesting perspective there. And once you associate that information with the most common information, which is most common information in business associated with the internet, is that your GDP growth proportional to your ability to have telecommunications or connectivity services. The more internet you have, penetration in a country, statistically speaking, the more likely your economy will grow. To see all of that associated into the business is quite amazing, quite fantastic.
Wow. You explained it so beautifully about the whole pattern, whole the cycle. One thing which created a curiosity in me is when I look at the submarine cables, right? The only thing which comes in first in view, which comes in my mind, or the first scene which comes in my mind is the big ocean waves, right? And there's someone who is
Mhm.
actually, putting these fibers or these cables, right? The picture which I've seen on the internet or something, right, which I can visualize,
Mhm.
are actually laid down on this ocean floor, right? Ocean bed. So
Sure.
how have you experienced that how these things are actually deployed, and what type of challenges these people, who are actually doing this thing, the making our vision a reality, what type of challenges they are facing or what type of problem they face?
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't fortunate enough to get on the ship
Hmm.
whilst the cable was being laid. I've got, like I said, good friends and people that worked with me and became really good friends that had that opportunity. But I've managed to see a couple of cable landing ships and understand thoroughly what the process goes by. So it all starts with the study of the topology of the ocean. This what it's called a desktop survey, where it's used a variety of equipment and methods and ocean maps and historic data and sensors and submarine devices and rovers and stuff like that to understand the the landscape of the ocean. Strangely enough, besides being underwater, the ocean is pretty much like the Earth because as you have peaks and valleys and places where it goes up, it goes down, different properties in terms of the types of rocks and sands that are available, and that all plays a part in the type of submarine cable that you're going to build, or even, for example, where you have the different protections of the submarine cable. Right? Because one of the things that I always asked was, okay, if it's there, there's a current, and
Yeah.
there's movement of the currents and the movement of the cable, and the current is always there. What happens? How do you prevent that from damaging? And so,
Yeah.
all of that has been studied before. Um, and so there's this desktop survey where you will survey, you identify where you're going to add your cable. All that information is given to the manufacturer. The manufacturer then, based on that information, will produce a cable according to that route. Right? It's never a straight line.
Hmm.
In digital maps, it looks like a straight line. It's never a straight line. Um, and that line, then this cable then needs to have different properties at different places. Let's call it that. Okay.
Hmm.
Because if it goes to a place where there's a lot of moving rocks and stuff like that, or sharp rocks, for example, not just soft sand underneath the ocean, then it's given different layers of protection, right? And
Hmm.
that's always to prevent the failure of the submarine cables. Remarkably, the industry has got a very low failure rate in terms of cable cuts. And from what I understand, it's all dependent on the ability for these cables to be properly installed. So if you do a proper desktop survey, a proper installation process, and everything else, you will have a more likelihood of having less and less events on your submarine cable system. So that's really critical, and you have many industries that develop that. We could name a few. Huawei Marine, and in that aspect, particularly in my opinion, I think Huawei and Nokia are quite fascinating companies. And the reason why I say they're fascinating is because, from a technological telecom perspective, they seem to operate end to end, right? One is more end to end than the other. What does that mean? You have a company that can build and install submarine cable systems, but also builds telecom towers and telecom antennas and data centers and even, you know, handheld devices. So end to end, they have this entire capability. Nokia is the same, pretty much. They also have the ability to deploy DWDM equipment, SLTE equipment, submarine transmission equipment, um, all the way to your home device, your home access point. And so these companies have a wealth of knowledge, and they're able to produce a lot of separate parts that at the end of the day, they all interconnect. And I think that's truly amazing. I have a very big respect for people that are in engineering and in science fields, because in my opinion, they've created two things that are truly amazing that's changed the world. The number one means obviously the telecommunications part, which is the part that I leave. The other part is aviation. Every time I look at the plane flying, I think, how did we do that? Okay. And how do we keep on doing that in a safe manner? And so telecoms, the fact that you and I are now able to see each other clearly, not pixelated, in real time, even though we are, different time zones away, kilometers away, it's truly astonishing. It's truly amazing. It's truly transformative, in my opinion. And so, yeah. Sorry, I think I went on.
No, no, no. It's simple because okay. Let me tell you, you are the first person who come from a submarine domain, and I spend my most of the time in the mobile networks, which are terrestrial networks. But now when we are talking about the satellites and these type of connectivity, and someone is talking about submarine, actually it is creating a lot of interest, and especially the way you are presenting how the things move and how the things get deployed and what type of current, and there's a landscape of the ocean. All these study is something which creates a lot of value to our listeners as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no problem. And so, if you're talking about value, I've personally seen the impact of what these type of infrastructures have done to at least my country. We're celebrating 50 years of independence.
Hmm.
And when Angola started, there was Sat 3, and I wasn't around for Sat 3, at least for the launch of it. When I came through, Sat 3 was already in production, but it had its challenges because the capacity for it, the amount of information that was able to deliver at one single time was, it was enough for that time, but it was still it now it's considered, you know, so little capacity. And the project that I worked for, Wax, was quite ambitious, and the people that I worked for, fortunately, had an interesting vision. And so I saw going, the ports. The
Hmm.
ports are the pretty much the doors, let's call it that, which have the ability to allow information to come in and out from the equipment side. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a whole entire process about it, where information is converted into bits, ones and zeros and all of that stuff, and then it's converted to different wavelengths, right? So, anyways, it's very technical. I'm not gonna get into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, the ports are key because the port size is how much information can go through. And when I started, we were talking about a technology that was associated mostly with SDMs, right?
Mm.
Pretty much SDH
Yeah.
technology. And so, we're talking about SDM, SDM1, SDM4, SDM16. The most was STM64 that then got converted to 10 gigs. Basically, we're talking about go from 155 meg, right? And all the way to 620 megs and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? And all the way to close to close to 10 gigs.
Mm.
And I've seen the company that I worked for go from activating S8 capacity quickly, understanding that that's not going to be enough. The entire consortium upgrading the system, and we are now talking about 150 megs all the way to 100 gigs. Right? They are now able to deliver close over 100 gigs. And the technology just keeps growing. It goes from 100 gigs now to 400 gigs,
Mm.
right? So if we think about the sheer volumes and increase of capacity that's taken over in the past 12, 15, almost 20 years, it's massive, right? And that is proportional to the amount of information that we can now send and receive. I've been truly blessed to see that whilst this capacity grows in Angola, see the difference in terms of quality of internet services and quality of or even the growth of telecommunications companies and the impact that that has in in society, not just the sector, but society itself. Companies are able to do voice conferencing, video conferencing for telemedicine and many other things. It was only possible for us to even consider doing remote work in Angola because these companies provided the systems and stuff like that. So the transformation is real. All right, the impact is visible, and I think that's the one thing where Africa and Angola still has a lot of room to grow. Is the investment of this infrastructure that allows connectivity to be shared amongst the many people, not just the subsea right now, obviously,
Mm.
but also the terrestrial segment, what we call the T segment, the connectivity between different countries, terrestrially, especially now, connecting the borders to these different places. Angola is not a landlocked country. We have a fairly good amount of coastline, but there are countries that are landlocked and that can now benefit from the investments that Angola has done.
Yeah.
And so to see that change and that transformation to me is amazing. We can pretty much see where a company or a service like this is able to really change and transform lives.
Mm.
And the ability for other companies to think, okay, now we can go on to the next phase of our project because communications and connectivity is ensured. It's guaranteed almost to say. So it's been an interesting journey.
So, if I don't talk about Angolians, the conversation will be incomplete. So, 50 years, obviously, the transformation has happened. The how the
Mhm.
people from Angola is adapting to the technology, like especially we call it Africa as a youth continent, right? So, what
Yeah.
the nature of the adoptions of these technologies, applications is happening, among the youth, or are they getting a sufficient connectivity, not fully, but to get their businesses running, or the education moving on? If you can share some light.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, look, I think there was a period during our 50 years where the ICT transformation part was relatively slow, and that's because slow to stagnate, let's call it that. And that's because of the civil war that we had. But
Hmm.
after that period between 2002, there's been massive growth, from the inception of leading telecommunications companies, mobile telecommunications companies, and now to the entrance of multinational companies into the country. Both in the mobile sector and then in other sectors like the infrastructure part of the business, data centers, towers, and all that kind of stuff. Angola has a very, very, we are in line in terms of demographic distribution across Africa. In other words, that means that we are majority, youth in terms of our demographic distribution. So there's a lot of young people. Adoption, I think the current numbers go around between 40%. The sensation is a bit less than that,
Hmm.
but just slightly less. The reason being is because there's a lot of concentration in terms of population towards the urban sectors currently, and now there's a shift back towards the rural areas, and these are the places that are underserved. In terms of adoption, I think Angolans are quite trendy in terms of adoption. I think we adopt technology fairly easy, fairly quickly. From the ability to pick up a cell phone and make phone calls, use the different social media platforms from TikTok to WhatsApp to Instagram and so on. But also adapt technology into its business, into its culture and into its daily life. And that's where you really see the impact. Um, we have a very interesting and solid banking sector as well that is steadily growing towards adopting technologies as well. Tapping into what it's called mobile money. But electronic payments are now growing exponentially as well. So we see that despite that period of stagnation, there's a period of concentrated growth across the adoption of technology, the innovation, startups popping up here and there. You got people that develop urban mobility solutions using ride-hailing services now, both from international but even local. So people are using technology here quite often to make sure that whatever resources they have to produce to deliver services, uh, are maximized through technology. It sounds simple, but the ability to go on WhatsApp and just browse at the catalog and order cakes for your food for your event, without
Hmm.
even meeting the person face to face because you have other things to do. Without going physically to a bank, for example, because you can do everything through your phone or through the internet. The ability to order medicine. There's an
Yeah.
application that was developed locally where these guys uploaded a bunch of information from pharmacies, and if you're looking for a specific medicine, they can either buy from you and give it delivered to you at your door, or they can tell you where to find it, which pharmacy.
Hmm.
Um, One of the local banks now developed a solution that is not just used for smartphones, but for feature phones, whereby
Hmm.
you can pretty much send a text and they'll tell you which is the nearest ATM near you that has cash, because we
Hmm.
still have a cash-driven society. So we can see that technology and telecommunications gradually embedding itself in the fabric of our society. Now, there's still a lot of room to grow. There's the rural sector. There is the places beyond the major cities of Angola that still require um, a lot of additional infrastructure in order for it to be successful. But that's the path that the country currently is in, and I think from that point of view, there'll be massive opportunities, massive. I mean, look, I work for, I volunteer for OUNOG, which is an organization that looks at the network operators here in Angola, right? And I also work with the Peering Forum, which is, in partnership with the internet exchange points guys, the guys that make sure that the internet stays as much as the information that travels over the internet stays locally. So it's more internet exchange points. It's something also that I learned throughout my livelihood. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
there was some very, very interesting presentations from an operational point of view. I mean, we're talking about adoption of SD-WAN technologies for micro and micro networks that can be easily deployed, from utilizing the existing infrastructure and adding services on top of it, and then making sure that you're maximizing on your existing investment to serve uh, communities or places that were underserved. So we're talking about how content is being delivered into this country, whether we are using Netflix or any other streaming platform, for example. Um, so these conversations are happening at at a very broad level, and so they're not just happening at sea level, right? They're also happening at the operational level. The people that actually go on and install these networks and build these micro services and want to grow. So there's a lot of exchange of information in this field, and so that's amazing to see.
Hmm. Hmm. Agree. This shift is required globally, right? Obviously, some countries are adopting it a little bit late. It's not about the intention; it's about the infrastructure availability. And I'm pretty much sure the development which is happening and the cost which has been incurred to set up these type of infrastructure is very much needed for every country in Africa to grow. And we always talk that Africa is a continent not only of the energy, the youth, the ideas, the local problem has a local solutions, which you rightly mentioned, and also that's a
Mm.
vision of taking Africa to the global level. That's a vision of what we listen and what we read of your Africa 2030, 2040 visions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, taking Africa into another level. Like I said, I was fortunate enough, and I believe I'm still fortunate enough to be part of the African story in terms of telecommunications, and even with the previous company and with the current company.
Hmm.
So my contributions, at least I feel that are quite widespread. I'll give you an example. The previous company that I worked for is the only company that I personally know of in the African continent that has um, a subdivision in South Africa, a subdivision in Nigeria, a subdivision in Europe, and a subdivision in Brazil, right? In America, in South
Yeah.
America. I don't know of many African telecommunication companies that have been able to do that, right? Especially in this particular order, all right? I know of telecommunications companies that go into Nigeria and into South Africa. I don't know one telecommunications company, except maybe another one now. Um, I think there's one, but this configuration, I haven't seen it.
Hmm.
So it shows the ability that African companies have to actually build themselves and organize themselves and to position themselves in strategic locations, right? And so that is a very unique proposition. And with that, they take on a different, they bring different knowledge, different experiences, and a different perspective into these different markets. Now, the true value of it is the ability of combining the information of all of these existing markets into strategic information into valuable, actionable information. And I see, speaking of the LNOG, there was a young South African guy that has a company that deploys cloud services, and he's got a very ambitious project. So imagine it's truly remarkable to see people moving from place to place, from country to country, across the continent, and said, because historically people thought, I need to go to Europe, I need to go to Asia or somewhere else in order to go. No, people want to build things in Africa, and these things that are being built, they want them to be connected because there's value in our connections there. There's value in our shared experience, in our shared economy, in our shared data transfer, in our shared knowledge, right? Um, so from what I can tell is that, I've been involved in setting up points of presence in South Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria. Uh, I've visited many countries across Africa, Kenya. In most of these countries, I've been able to survey the telecom infrastructure from data centers to networks, and it's truly impressive and remarkable what's been done in the last years. I mean, we've got networks going from east to west. We've got companies setting up data centers across multiple countries in in 5 years to be able to set up 6 data centers in 5 years, tier 3 data centers in 5 years across different countries. It's a massive undertaking, and people are doing it here. Just think about it, just in terms of permits, recruitment, staffing, logistics. It's logistical, but even still, many countries and many companies, I'm sorry, are taking on that gamble. And I think that's a true statement of intent on the. It's not a question of being a perceived understanding of what the potential is. No, people understand that this is where growth will happen, and so people are not taking chances. They're making a statement of investment, and results are there. Very, very, very rarely you see these companies that are not being successful. Very, very rarely.
Yeah, yeah. And from your opinion, what will be the next innovation which you foresee that is going to happen for Africa?
Look, we can't ignore this whole AI conversation. We cannot ignore this whole um, artificial intelligence, right? But Africa also has, Africa and Angola in particular, we have the ability to see or survey, because countries are a few steps ahead, then we can pick and choose which stages we want to take on and which stages we want to skip, right? We don't need to do the entire process. We can just go in and take the best of it and say, no, we'll take this part and we'll adopt it. We'll take this part. And now that the concepts are redefined and now everybody knows exactly. Let me look at how it was for the 5G and even 4G networks, right? Some companies in some countries are skipping 4G network. They're going straight from 3 to 5. And so these things are happening. Now, the artificial intelligence part in Africa is to me a tricky one. And it's tricky because it in order for it to be successful, it relies on the assumption that certain key infrastructures are already there. Power, water, steadily reliable connectivity, it's already there. Once you have that and many interconnected networks, you can build artificial intelligence networks or data center or services to power a whole new side of the industry. We are not technically there yet. right? And that's
Mm.
because of the infrastructure part of the business. Now, what I do see is that there's now also rampant investment into the infrastructure part of the business because, at least from here in my country, hydroelectric power is quite cheap. It's quite
Mm.
cheap. We have a very good pricing, even across the SADC region, quite cheap. Energy pricing is quite cheap. There's a challenge in terms of energy distribution. So that's where I see the investments happening. But energy generation, not really. Energy generation is cheap, essentially. Angola produces oil. We can even decide to pivot and say, look, let's build more gas powered electricity power plants. Instead of us burning fuel directly, oil directly, let's burn the gas that is already a byproduct of our production processes of oil, since Angola is a top producer of oil across Africa. But we need the grids. We
Mm.
need the long haul grids. We need the distribution grids. We need the ability to provide water better. And water investments is massive. You have to build massive infrastructure from a civil
Mm.
point of view. Those water treatment plants, water pumping plants, massive cabling that you have to build. And we have a very large country that needs to have that. So, on top of that, there's the ability to pay for the services. So, the inclusion of financial services, the bankerization rate, and the ability of people to have, bank accounts, and integrate the informal economy to the formal economy also needs to happen simultaneously as well. And once we have a good understanding of that, then I believe we'll be able to take full advantage of the next wave of of um,
The analytics
of
and
digital transformation. So only then we'll be able to. Now, of course, there are people using and utilizing artificial intelligence solutions here, but let's be real. We're not building massive, 10 gigawatts or 100 gigawatt, 100 megawatt or 10 gigawatt campuses. That's not happening across the continent. It's not happening across
mm.
Angola at this point in time. Just for reference, I think the largest data center in Angola has a design capacity for 10 megawatts. 10
Mm.
megawatts, it's nothing for internet, for artificial intelligence. I mean, we're not even at 1 gigawatt. We're not even at 100 megawatts.
Mm.
So there's a lot still to go. I think we'll pay attention. We are training people in this field. We have now data scientists coming out of the woodworks, and that's fantastic. People that are specializing either data science and data analysis and machine learning and all of these things, because that's another part of the ecosystem that we need to take care of.
Mm.
We can't be complacent. We can't say, let's wait. A lot of things need to happen at the same time. But I still believe that there's a massive uh, investment that needs to be done in the infrastructures and in the reliable technologies that we currently have, cloud computing, telecoms and stuff. That needs to be stabilized and democratized. In other words, it needs to
Mm.
be stable and accessible to a lot more people here. Once we
Yeah.
do that, and we add the layer of artificial intelligence, that's what we're going to see the true benefits of it.
True. And you rightly pointed one important aspect. I was also talking with few clients, and they have an AI as an aspiration, right? But when we look at their network, so even they lack the basic automation. All the departments are working in silos, and then the first task should be first interconnect each and everything. Let's make a layer of interconnected departments, and then you can put a top of AI to create that type of actionable items on a real time, near
Mm-hmm.
real time basis, as well as to get the more insights and more experience what your end customer is facing, and they are, and also mix their behavior patterns to get the more and more valuable things. So I 100% resonate what you mentioned, that there it should not happen at an overnight. It should be a step by step process, and the basic infra has to be set up, which required a massive investment. But yes, the plans are made not for just couple of years, but for next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, if I ask your experience, because you are a part of this a wider ecosystem of data centers and this submarine cable services. So, how you approach and what type of challenges you are facing while proposing your offerings to the C-level executives, especially to that market which is still which is still developing.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest challenge is currently that we have, in the past, I would say in the past, very past, that people don't know what they need, right?
Mm,
And I don't think that's the case anymore. Um, I think the challenge is the ability to convey value and transformational impact.
mm,
Okay, that's the major challenge. And so, depending on who you speak to, you have to adopt either a technical jargon communication style or a more economic based communication style or more social impact communication based style in order for them to perceive and truly understand what is it that's being proposed. Budgets always very, very
right.
point of contention.
Yeah.
But the budget is associated to a very key problem, a recurrent problem, which is trust and reliability.
Right.
Um, so if you look at our landscape here, because these infrastructures that I've mentioned were not easily available or democratized. A lot of people face inwards. So I will build a lot of what I need in order for me to operate. And I don't trust anybody else to do that for me. So conveying that trust and that the trusting in what we provide and what the services that we sell, whether that be telecom or data center or cloud or something like that, but conveying that trust and that trust will have a positive impact into your business is the most challenging aspect that I currently see. So it's no longer how knowledge people are about it, is how much they trust these systems to be reliable, how much they trust these systems to be accurate, how much they trust these systems to be secure, whether it be telecommunications, data storage, whatever. And making sure that that trust is converted into an action.
Mm,
That is what I see in my professional opinion now. That takes a little bit longer. So we have, depending on the maturity of the company and the urgency and the situation, we have relatively long sales cycles, right? This is
yeah.
despite you having relatively few critical services providers to go to. Sales cycles are quite long because it takes time for people to say, are you really going to deliver what you promised? So that, in my opinion, is being the biggest challenge.
Mm, I understood. And important point which I want to ask from you, that if the sales cycles are long, right? Obviously, you need to develop a trust, with your prospect, right? Who has not converted into
Mhm.
your client, right? Or it's a new account for you. How much is the patience level and how much is the pressure you get it from the internal management, as well as how the sales warrior, I call it, should mitigate or should handle that pressure? What is your say on that?
So it all depends on which cycle of the business you are currently. But as a salesperson, in a company that provides services that need to be sold, I understand there's urgency, right?
Hmm.
So one of the things that I tell people that want to join sales, it's like there's pressure always. We are never relaxing. And this is the only reason why a true sales account will say, no, I'm always selling. Yeah, it's family time and all that. Yeah, but if it's critical, you're gonna take that phone call, right? So you're always selling.
Hmm.
So I understand the pressure that comes with it. Um, how do you manage the expectations? That's you've got to communicate objectively, and you have to do the work to show with evidence that there's progress, right? You can't say I spoke to the client and not report that with evidence, right? You in data in that data capturing is critical. You have to take the time to understand that despite the long sales cycles, you have to move strategically and understand that you have to attack or touch on the critical accounts or targets or prospects that will generate the most impact to you over the period of the quarter of the year. It doesn't matter. Okay?
Hmm. Hmm.
So plan strategically, report that communicate and manage expectations with transparency, but also with a sense of urgency. Okay. Um, because you because if you don't manage the expectations internally,
Yeah.
you're gonna be under pressure. It's
Yes.
that's the number one thing. But be transparent and be urgent about it. Right. If you have something, if you have a quote to do it today, do it today. Don't do it tomorrow. Do it today. Ask for help. Ask for help internally. Ask for help inside of the client, so the prospects infrastructure. Like, what do you need to make this decision happen? Do we need to speak with your C level? Do we need to speak with your technical level? Let's have a quick meeting with your finance and your procuring manager. Let me understand what your process is. Is it do we have to go for a bid? Is this a tender? How long does it take to review? So I need to capture all of that information in order for me to manage the expectations. Fortunately for me, I've worked with people that have a fairly great level of maturity. And
Hmm.
so even when they do set the objectives and the expectations, what they truly want to see is movement, right? Stagnation is the worst thing in sales. You know
Hmm.
this, right?
Yes.
No
Yes.
movement at all is the worst thing possible. But we have to be transparent. We have to be coherent. In other words, we need to. So it's not just about transparency. It's the information that we're sharing needs to be clearly understood, and we have to have a sense of urgency. Sales is pressure. If you don't make the sale, somebody else will because he needs it, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do you convert that need into an action form of trust? And I've been fortunate to work with people that understand that. I've been fortunate enough to understand that there's as much pressure as there is on me, there's more pressure on people above me, right? It
True.
all comes with the different levels of responsibility. And so I try to convey trust, transparency, and reliability. It used to be in the past that salespeople are seen as sly or mischievous person that will do anything. I don't do that. Right?
Hmm.
If I believe that you don't need the service, I'm not going to sell it to you.
Hmm.
But that means that I'm speaking with the wrong person.
True.
I've done my assessment wrong, so I'm going to speak with those who really need to. It's like trying to sell a two-door Ferrari to somebody that actually needs an ambulance, and you say, no, the Ferrari is going to take you to the hospital faster. But what you really need is an ambulance. But you just want to sell that Ferrari. I don't think that does justice to what we do, whereby salespeople in our industry and reliable and dependable and trustworthy people that you build relationships with. Um, my clients and my partners can pick up the call and say, "Hey, I need your help here. I need to do this, and that. Do you know how we can do it? We'll work it out. Even if the solution is doesn't come by me directly, I'll say, look, I know a guy that does something similar. Let me put you guys together. Zero cost
Yeah.
because um, I gain the trust of two people,
Mm.
and and at the end of the day, I don't compromise my values. I can go back home and take a nap peacefully. So there is that to me is critical, is key, but it's also important for management to have an aligned vision with how you operate and what you do in things. If you don't trust your salesperson, don't hire them.
Agree, agree. I fully agree with you. What you rightly mentioned. If you don't trust your salesperson, don't hire him.
Just
Ah,
don't.
yeah, it's simple. Yeah, actually, because if the internal trust is not there, or even that there's a trust between your client as well as your internal management, right? If you are not you're able to match your frequencies, right? Let me put it in more simpler words. Not able to
Yeah,
match your frequencies, it's better to move ahead, right? Separate yourself. That's make your life
yeah,
more easier, right? Because
yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
at the end of the day, without the backing from the management or without the blessing from the customer, who wants to be open to you, things will never move. How hard you try.
Yeah, I had a conversation about 2 days ago. Somebody has asked me, what do I need to do in order to be successful in sales? What I told him is that I'm not gonna say, know your product, all that stuff. Yeah, that's important, sure. But anybody can know a product. You can learn that. What I said to him was, be a person people trust.
Mhm.
Be dependable. All right. That will massively help you in terms of sales. That will ensure that you are part of the conversation whenever a need arises, and be a person that helps solve needs, right? That's whether it's your direct, whether this is the product that you sell directly or just by proxy, by putting one, two, and two together. That needs to be your first, your primary focus. Be of service, be of trust, and make sure that you are able to 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 communicate with honesty, with intent, with honesty. So if I speak to you, I don't speak to you and say, no, I didn't come here to sell you something. No, 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 no. My time is money. Okay. I came here to sell you something.
Mm.
But it's because I believe you need it, and it will change the way you do business, the way you operate it, the way your companies or your staff, your team goes about it. That I believe in it, right? Um, um, and so I think it's a skill that has been lost. Even though we are outsourcing a lot of it now, the
Mm.
ability to qualify leads, it's an interesting skill that I think it's being lost these days because we're outsourcing a lot. We have these call centers and these companies that do pre-qualification for you. But a true salesman needs to be able to walk into a room, speak with a couple of people and say yes, yes, no,
Mm.
and be able to qualify immediately, and then probe further. You can ask further questions. But in order to understand that happening, where you're going with it's a critical skill, in my opinion.
I agree. A very important message and and that comes with experience, right? Because when you start your career in sales, you look for the fast closures, right? But when you
Yeah,
become understand, then you go with the pace, and but you try to understand, maybe the not every ball you can hit the sixer, right? You have to play and give the respect, and obviously, I must say, give the respect to the pitch, right? Because this is the pitch which you have to stay for the longer time. Fantastic message, and I resonate every word which you rightly mentioned. And the qualification, is the essential. And obviously, the when you qualify, the things and the priorities always gets changed, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
respect that situation also, which comes, as you rightly mentioned, what how the times look like, which cycle you are in. Because today, what is my need? As of yesterday, we call it in the telecom, may will not happen in the next quarter because then something new will come.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's something that I see it a lot. Sometimes I get phone calls of people that trying to, I don't, I tell this honestly, I don't buy. I'm a horrible buyer, right? I'm not the right person to buy. But if you want to sell something to me or to my organization, speak with that person. He knows the need perfect. So I try not to waste people's time in
Hmm.
that aspect. But look, we are prepared, and I think there's a resilience that comes with salespeople because we go into a conversation expecting a no. The no is sure, right? And it's very rare that people talk about the no. Right? We 90% of what we do falls, fails. So every day we're working towards a very low success rate, and we know it. We drive ourselves, we organize ourselves. Our path is for that very small percent rate of success. And it's also very difficult emotionally, depending again on which part of the cycle you are, for you to receive a no, right? But you have to shake it off and be mature about it, be put your big boy pants on and carry on. But you have to assume that not everybody is going to buy your product at first. Not everybody needs it, you know, at that point in time. Um, but handle that with dignity, handle that with so that at least some sort of reference remains. But be strategic about it, plan about it. People think sales is just to wake up randomly and pick up. No, 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 no. There are routines that you need to do every day. You need to look at your CRM, your numbers, your you need to look at your prospects and say, where are we? Are we almost closing? What's or are we far from closing? But we will close. Or nah, this guy doesn't even need it or want it or is willing to pay for it. And so don't don't not to rush in terms into into one of those spin cycles conversations, situation, problem, incentive, and then the need, all of that stuff. You can analyze all that from a data perspective, from a qualitative perspective. And that there. There's also the gut feeling, which is something that you develop. You say, yeah, there's something there. When he
Hmm.
said it, there's something there. But make sure that you follow the processes, the routine that you set up for yourself. Be organized, and that will help you navigate the many no's that you're going to get in order for you to get your very low but very rewardable success rate. It's a low success rate, but the rewards are massive, right? And you can either go from one or two big sales that will set you for the entire year, or many small sales that will set you for the entire year. Whichever way you find that is important. Every win is critical, and every win, every sale teaches you something new about yourself, about your method, about your routine, about your organization, and about the person that you're selling to or the company that you're selling to. So, yeah, be purposeful, be organized. It does not happen randomly. Be available, be of service.
Approachable. Be approachable.
Yeah,
And position yourself well so that if something requires sometime later, they at least have your name and your contact details so that they can approach you anytime. and that
Absolutely.
and that's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I've I've gone through hmm, very difficult sales processes, periods. There and sometimes you go through a drought. Nobody's buying anything, and you have to reinvent yourself. You have to create the awareness. You have to, like you said, make yourself available. Remind people that we can be of service,
Hmm.
and it requires some sort of mental capacity for you to not just crumble and give up and now I'm going to do something else. But if you have a system, organize it, test it, review it, but follow it. It's not random. It can feel random. It's not random.
Hmm.
Somebody asked about you in a certain meeting. Somebody gave your number to somebody else. Somebody called you, and if you see a lost missed call, send a message. Just return and say, "Hey, I got this. Who are you? Is there anything I can help you with?" I called by mistake, and okay, cool. Here's my details. If you need something, we'll chat at the later stage.
Hmm.
Um, and with technology these days, I think people are losing the essence of the process of the sale. Go see people. Get out of your office and go hang out with them. Go to their door. Go and meet them. I do that quite often. You know I try to have people face to face as much as possible. Both to try to understand where they are in their business cycle, their processes, and their projects, but also just touch base and see if there's more to come.
Mm. No, agree, fully agree with you. And also, uh, one more thing which I personally believe, that talk to as many people, because sometimes people remain stuck with few handful of clients or handful of prospects, considering that these are the only buyer in the whole world, right? Or in that lobby, right? Because
Hmm.
but look at a full ecosystem and try to serve as many people, because not every person will buy $1 million product, but there should be some
Yeah,
offering for you which can actually help the people at the last mile, so that it can directly consume it. Then you can get the volume. At the end of the day, you have to make your numbers perfect, right? So either one sale or maybe multiple sales.
yeah. The important thing is to get the sales. You need to get it. Um, And so, yeah, expand your network. See a lot of people, you only talk to C level. That's cool. C level's always traveling. They're not available.
Hmm.
By the time they have time for you, the person's already brought something else to C level, right? And so, again, and this is the reason why I think it's important for you to treat people well, treat people with respect, um, because these people will keep the door open for you.
Hmm. Yeah.
And we have to be very grateful and treat them with grace, um, whether that be you don't know who has the trust of the technical director, for example. He makes a decision, the technical director, but he trusts this guy with his opinion. So involve these people in the process as well, and try to understand how decisions are taken in certain organization.
True.
And and
And
and as much as possible, even for your own sake, document it. I know it
mm,
sounds very, but document as much as possible. Just make a little note. Just, write it in a piece of paper or in your CRM. But document your process and who you're speaking to, because it will either help you train somebody in the future, or it will be serve as a reference for you down the line.
yeah, for the next conversation.
Yep.
Right, right. Uh, yeah, this is still an extensive topic, and we can go hours. Still the conversation will not complete. So I want to take the your attention to the next part, which is very important, is the startup ecosystem. And I've seen that a lot
Mhm.
of startups are getting uh, what to say, created, or they are coming up every week. We can see a more number of startups, which are solving a unique problem, as they claim. But as per your opinion, what are the major challenges or barriers which they are facing, and they are not able to scale up or even, become profitable?
Ah, well, there's a few, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um, I think so finances is always an issue in terms of a startup, but the idea that you have the the people and the timing in order for you to scale your product and opportunity is a major hassle in terms of startups. Startups operate in a very tense and volatile environment. They only operate with constraints. They have very little money, very little people, very little time, and they are solving a unique problem. So a
Mhm.
unique problem is can be perceived as a massive problem, but it's quite unique.
Yeah.
Um, and so because they are so constrained in many areas, startups have a difficulty in prioritizing um, elements or things that will lead them to growth. They don't know if they invest in the marketing or in the product. They don't know if they invest in the the delivery of the product or just in the consumption of the product. And when do they go to market? Do they go with a product that is finished or in the process of being finished? And,
Mhm.
I have a lot of respect for people that do these startups things. It's not an easy environment. They're faced with challenges every day. Sometimes they work two, three jobs in order to sustain their project. Um, and more often than not, they have an idea that could change, but is also sometimes not a priority. It's not a direct. It's impactful, but it's not perceived that way.
Mhm.
So, how do we help startups? Well, number one thing that we need to help startups with is giving them one time. We need to give them time, and we need to give them an opportunity. I remember that I used to work with startups, and one of the things that we try to do is to give them, okay, we don't have any money, but if your startup has any, computational requirements, we'll give you cloud service for free. You know, this amount of resources for you to start your business. So we need to help them out. Um, I don't know. I actually met one of the guys that did that. Have a very interesting startup, which was a transportation platform.
Mhm.
And funny enough, he grew the business so much that he managed to hand it over to somebody, and now he went to do something else.
Mhm.
But I fully remember having him face to face, and he telling me his vision. And I had to look at my boss and say, let's give him the virtual private server for him. But they don't have any money. I said, look, I think this is going to be a good deal, and it doesn't affect us, right? It's like small amount of requirement. Whether we sell this or not at this point in time, we're still gonna make our numbers. So let's keep that. And he was quite successful. Um, it's a it's a it's a transport platform whereby you can book um, bus tickets to go from anywhere in Angola or even in the SADC region, go from Angola to Namibia by bus, and you can go into that platform and pay for it. You organize all of the information. All the buses leave on this time. All the buses leave on that time. You can go from here to there. This is how you pay. And a lot of people didn't weren't in the business of traveling by bus at the time because the roads were not so good and people didn't trust the bus drivers and so on. But now things are changing, and so having the ability to identify something that has potential is key. To give them time, give them some resources, not just financial resources, give them training, give them help them out to be successful and give them the opportunity to present their unique solution. I think those are the key things that we need to do. The rest is all of that stuff, funding and all that jazz that we already know. But help people on a day-to-day basis have tools and resources to build those startups. Introduce them to the right people that either will give them money or will give them time. We will give them time of their skills, their experiences, their mentorship, all that kind
Hmm.
of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because you are not everything is financially related. Your time investment and the guidance, because they have the energy, but sometimes they lose the direction because of they are doing multiple things at the same time. So they are doing the product development. They are also doing the sales. They are also trying to convince the investors, as well as they are trying to manage the small team which they are able to get it or hired. Obviously they cannot get very talented resources right from day one till the time they get some blessing. But yes, important part is the direction is missing. So pointing it to the right people, or then give a time to improve and improvise themselves as a person as well as their products and their offerings. Fantastic. So I'm pretty much sure you are doing a lot of mentoring and a lot of community development also during your free time if you get any.
Yeah, yeah, I do. There's a couple of guys and people that I work with closely in terms of mentoring. That I spend some time, sharing my experience. Um, and I do this because I had good mentors in the past. I
Mm,
still have good mentors right now. And so I do spend some time with some people that are willing to, listen to my perspective. Uh, I also do some volunteer work with a couple of organizations. The AONOG, I'm a board member of the AONOG organization, where we pretty much try to create spaces and opportunities for the operators. The reason being is that there's a lot of C-level events, right?
mm,
There's always gazillions, many, many C-level, but the people that actually do the work don't seem to have the opportunity to showcase what they do, to interact with their peers. So we try to do that and make sure that they have a place where they can come together and share their knowledge, share their experiences and their success, sometimes even their failures. Um, yeah, there's a few other things, in terms of uh, community support, to um, some communities that are less privileged, let's call it that. But that's something that I usually try to, and not to say to keep private, but I try to keep it in a very small circle because it's always very sensitive to do that. But yeah, essentially that's was I'm always trying to give back to the community and to the continent. Um, but if I had to give one advice is uh, do no harm, right? If you can't do any good, do not do any harm.
mm,
So I try to live my life in that way.
mm. Wow. Right, so do not harm. That is also important thing. Be neutral, be open, support as much as you can because these people really need the support and they can do and I always say they are very creative because they have identified some areas which has been totally ignored by the masses, but they want to do something. So the great
Mm.
idea, the next idea or next billion revenue, not I should not say the idea is the next billion revenue is something which they are going to create it for the nations and obviously for their own community as well. Ah, Fabio,
Yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
fantastic discussion. I know the you we can have a long more discussion, but in the interest of time, I will take a pause here. But believe me, for me, it's an eye opener. I am now able to visualize what you are doing in the space of this submarine cables. That's a big learning. I can visualize it. I can understand the challenges which you talk about the next development, especially from AI infrastructure. Trust is the key takeaway from for me, as well as the contribution which you are doing for the society, as well as the beautiful tagline, "Don't do any harm."
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity, and if you ever need to talk again, I'll find the time.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any last message which you want to give it to our audience?
Just just enjoy the time you have around here. Look, we're always very busy. We're always very looking around for things here and there, but it's important to enjoy the time that we have around here. And whilst we are here, again, we should do no harm, and try and do as much good as possible. But we have it seems very uh, cliche, but time flies very fast. So take the time, look around, smell the roses, and be purposeful, but also be impactful at the same time.
Mm. Live by the purpose and don't
Yeah,
rush. And don't rush. That is also the important part. Mm. Perfect. Perfect.
absolutely.
Great message again. Thank you, Fabio, once again. And to the audience, until next time, this is Deepak Vijay signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.